Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to join us for Vandis's webinar with our partner, Alkira. At today's webinar, William Collins, Alkira's principal cloud architect, will introduce you to Alkira's cloud networking platform to show you how you can accelerate your journey to the cloud, in the cloud, and across multi-cloud environments. He's joined by Ryan Young, Vandis's Chief Technology Officer. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone this webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat window and we will either address them as we go or at the end of the session. We also have a few polling questions today. The polls will appear in the chat, so please have that open on the side of your screen. And lastly, just a quick reminder to visit our website, vandis.com/events, for a list of events that might be of interest to you. For those of you who are new to Vandis, we provide managed services and IT solutions to optimize the security and performance of network infrastructures, both on-premise and in the cloud. We design IT solutions to meet each organization's unique needs and goals, and for over 39 years, from mid-market to enterprise clients, Vandis has delivered comprehensive strategies for secure IT infrastructures. We have partnered with Alkira because as more organizations leverage a multi-cloud strategy to optimize costs and performance, this also comes with new networking and security challenges. Alkira's cloud networking as a service will help our clients secure, scale, and simplify management of their hybrid and multi-cloud environments. And now is my pleasure to turn it over to William.
Thank you, Joanne. Let's go ahead and get started here. So to kick things off, I wanted to just quickly examine where are many enterprises today. So cloud, multi-cloud, they continue to take a lot of attention in the world of tech. But on-premises networks, hey, they're still around, and for most companies, they aren't going away. And neither is that demand for partner services and lots of business-to-business interactions. So with these, just sort of thinking about partner services, thinking about cloud, thinking about multi-cloud, what are businesses trying to do? What are the distinct challenges in these areas? And the first thing is modernizing existing application portfolios. So this includes doing migrations to one or more public cloud providers, perhaps. And this also requires a great deal of just setting up reliable connectivity to the public cloud. You got to have solid connectivity. And second is new applications are being born in the cloud. Let's call this greenfield. So more often than not, these applications require access to data and to backend services that live in the data center. So taking into consideration this brownfield and greenfield scenarios that we have, this ultimately makes things hybrid. And this has become really the new normal for a lot of businesses out there, this hybrid sort of life. And third is partner and business-to-business interactions. And this is a big one. So say that you're a financial institution and you have many partners. You need secure connectivity and the ability to do effective resource sharing. And having to take this beyond the existing process you may have in the data center today and throw multiple public clouds in the mix, this complicates things. And this is a major business imperative. The ability to integrate with other businesses outside of your own as seamlessly as possible, this gives you a competitive advantage in your respective market. So what capabilities do enterprises need today? Now that we have that general idea of some of the groundwork, what capabilities are really sought after in the market? So being able to deploy and operate networking to the cloud, as we talked about, inside the cloud and eventually across clouds. And with that, it's critical to have some uniformity there with maybe your routing, having some common controls and policy frameworks in place across all these distinct areas. And last is integration. Integration is just super important. Say that your organization has selected and invested in a particular next generation firewall vendor, and it has tie-ins to many things, including your incident response processes, among other things. So being able to leverage that best-in-class technology and the engineering experience that you already have, that you've already built on staff, is a huge value proposition. And what about routing? So when you think about the capabilities that you had at your fingertips for on-premises networking, you'll notice these things are different in the cloud. There is a high level of complexity associated with things that used to be simple. Well, maybe not simple, but simple in terms of comparing to cloud, like basic traffic engineering, routing traffic through a firewall, or even just filtering routes. So I want to touch briefly on a few setbacks that a lot of our customers faced in the past as this hybrid multi-cloud world started to grow. So the first is transitive routing. So this is basically just intelligent packet forwarding, which can direct your traffic to the right place, whether it be a VPC in the same cloud or another cloud's VPC or VNet, or even some of the networks that you have on premises. So when customers go beyond a few VPCs and into other clouds, this becomes pretty complex, difficult to manage, and you really run into challenges when you try to operate at scale. Next is that traffic engineering. So I hear a lot of things like, okay, how do I filter inbound and outbound routes when taking into consideration the source or destination could be the same cloud or from cloud to cloud or on premises to cloud, and back to on premises, how can I easily set priority for routes? And what about my business to business connections? A lot of times we still live in a world with lots of IP overlap that gets involved here, and many other issues that will ultimately require intelligent natting. In this complex world, how do we navigate that? Where is traffic sourced? Where do you apply the natting? Is it many to one? Is it many to many? Is it unidirectional? Is the port changing? Lots of challenges and considerations there. And last is service insertion. So I think the world has moved beyond the idea that you send, every last packet through a next-gen firewall. Some traffic in some circumstances may not need to go through firewalls and cloud based on the type of service it is. And this shouldn't be a zero-sum game like all or nothing here. A question we get a lot of is how can we selectively steer specific traffic through our firewalls? Is there any way to make this easier to deploy and operate across clouds and at scale? So this is where Alkira comes in. So we provide a lot of these capabilities that meet the business where it is today while providing a pathway to the future into cloud. So the first question you might ask, and the first question I get a lot of, is where exactly in the market do we fit? What is our purpose? So when the race to cloud started out, many solutions out there were focused on getting you to the cloud, and they dropped you off right at the front gate. This could have been like vanilla IPsec, VPNs, SD-WANs, ZTNAs, colo providers, and so on. And this raised a big question. So we're here, now what? As it turns out, getting to the cloud was only the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more. So networking inside and across clouds brings in a lot of new considerations. Like, how do we leverage cloud native capabilities? How are we doing high availability? Do we have disaster recovery in place? How do we integrate services? What does our day 2 look like? How do we build a consistent operational experience? So these problems, these considerations, these 2 distinct areas is why our customers come to us in the first place. Having a common way to deploy and operate networking to the cloud, inside the cloud, and across clouds is really our bread and butter. So now that we have an idea of where we fit in the market, let's go into the solution a little bit. So Alkira's Cloud Services Exchange consists of a highly available and resilient network of what we refer to as cloud exchange points, which are meshed together over our high-speed, low latency cloud backbone. And this is built atop the hyperscale infrastructure. So as we can see from this data point at the top there, is where a significant level of investment is happening around the world from all the cloud providers. To kind of put this in some perspective, I think the big 3 hyperscale cloud providers, their cumulative capex spend since 2000 is like somewhere around 700 billion. If that adds some perspective. So when you think of the best in terms of performance, like global reach, innovation, like new things, that's where it is right now. So these CXPs that we deploy, they can be deployed wherever hyperscale infrastructure, for instance, like an AWS region or an Azure region exists. So beyond that, usually the next question I see is, what is this cloud exchange point? Let's dig into that a little bit. So what it really is a cloud delivered point of presence with a full routing stack, integrated management plane, control plane, and data plane elements baked in. So this essentially arms you with the ability to interconnect your users, your sites, your regional SD-WAN fabrics, colos, public clouds, and whatever type of network that you need to connect at whatever scale and capacity your business requires. So as a product, delivered on cloud infrastructure like ours, that's leveraging cloud native, this affords us the ability to take that scale out approach rather than scale up, like you would with, just appliances or like agent-based solutions. And with these CXPs, you connect them. You connect to these CXPs rather based on your geographical proximity to them. Today, many of our customers are wanting, as part of their strategic vision, they have a best-in-class vision for each respective area of their technology stack. So this allows them to, leverage various high-quality products that go along with their speed of innovation and existing business and technology processes that they have today. So for this, I'm just going to jump into a story here. Why not? So
before you do, I did launch the poll for this one.
Sure. Thank you, Joanne.
So you should see a poll on the chat window of your screen. What security and networking vendors are you currently using? And then William will go into his story as you're answering.
Awesome. So we had a customer that had they chose to leverage a next-gen firewall vendor to secure their networking end-to-end. They made a strategic decision. So they already had the engineering talent on staff that had developed, deployed, and engineered and understood this firewall vendor's design. They had built processes around the operations, the incident response, and all the other aspects that were required from compliance perspective. The problems started creeping in though with cloud adoption and expansion. So on top of the design and architecture for handling the routing, maintaining traffic symmetry and scale, like in the data centers with the physical firewalls, when they expanded into multiple clouds, they realized that the bootstrapping of virtual firewalls, the traffic engineering, the auto scaling, and many other things were different in not just a single cloud, but across clouds. So this created design sprawl and scaling challenges for them. And they were just not using, at the end of the day, they weren't using their resources as efficiently as they could have been. So with, bringing in Alkira, with Alkira's integration for this vendor, we were able to not only reduce the amount of virtual firewall sprawl, but we reduced the physical firewalls required across their enterprise as well. Because we were able to use what they had more efficiently. Traffic symmetry being maintained and routing was much more efficient, all of which, led to a better performance and a better experience, streamlined operations. And to provide, a lot of things go back to agility these days. A lot of products are geared towards agility. So to provide some perspective here on what, I mean by agility, on average, across our customers, we see an 80% reduction in network provisioning time, 10 times faster response to business requests, and a 40% reduction in network TCO. And to add additional context here, we recently had a customer that came to us with a set of challenges. They had made an acquisition, and that acquisition happened to be in a different cloud than what they were in at that time, their preferred cloud provider. And out of the gate, they ran into challenges with getting the right type of visibility into the new org's cloud networking. On top of this, they had a mandate to begin migrating data and services to their preferred cloud provider. Now, their network and cloud team had spent a few months attempting to build a solution with cloud native resources across these environments, but just couldn't get it past the finish line. Now, when they came to us using Alkira, we had a pilot environment available to the customer inside of 24 hours. And with an additional 48, they were able to connect their cloud providers together, do service insertion, and actually apply their standard routing policies across these areas. And the final result was, the customer using our cloud insights to audit the new org's cloud networking, and then having the routing and policy set up. They wanted to move to production directly from that pilot environment to begin migrations ASAP. So these results speak for themselves. How fast does your business want to move? That's how fast we can go. So your network, at the end of the day, it's only as good as its availability to support the business. So when you jump into cloud, you'll notice many resources that you had at your disposal with on-premises networking missing. In some cases, really, this is fine. But in a lot of cases where you need high availability beyond a single VPC, and you throw in networks from other clouds and on-premises networks too, you really start to notice those gaps. You begin to really feel those gaps. So before I talk high availability, I want to touch on one thing here. So each of the networks that you connect, that you onboard to Alkira, we call a connector. So this could be any of the public cloud provider networks or internet exit and, software as a service applications, things like that you're connecting. So to make, as far as like a whole solution though, to make it complete, we have to be able to integrate on-premises networks too. So, my sites here could be representative of like IPsec, SD-WAN fabrics, data centers, colos, or even, some remote access. So when you're a network engineer, when you're tasked with designing a network, you have to ensure that, high availability is built into that network so you can withstand failures. And in the cloud world, high availability means being resilient to failures across availability zones. So we moved, from on-premises to having like device redundancy, A side, B side, to having redundancy across availability zones. And as a design principle, our cloud exchange points in Alkira are fault tolerant and highly available by default. So each network that you connect has multiple paths for connectivity leveraging multiple availability zones. This means that by design, degradation or failures of any single path has zero to minimal impact to the operations of that network. In certain circumstances, business applications or even partners connecting to services may be hosted in a given region may require cross-region redundancy, due to compliance and regulatory reasons. So in the unlikely scenario where all paths to a CXP region are unavailable, connectors enabled for cross-region redundancy can basically tunnel and have connectivity into Alkira over an alternative CXP. And that CXP doesn't even have to be residing in the same hyperscale cloud infrastructure. For instance, like say that I have region A and region B here, so two CXPs. My region A here could be in AWS and my region B could be in Azure. One of the, and kind of moving on to something that's just really important and something that's generally hard to do on premises with, physical gear, is getting into segmentation. So one of the critical capabilities that we talked about like way in the beginning was uniformity, meaning, common controls and policy across your clouds. So before I think a lot of times we want to jump straight into policy. What can I do with policy? What can I do for this or that? But before you're able to create meaningful policy, you have to have an intelligent way to group things, to segment things. So with Alkira, we have two different methods here. The first is at a macro level, and we call these segments. So you can think of them as unique routing and policy space, essentially. So each segment you provision is capable of supporting overlapping IP addressing and independent routing policy, kind of like traditional network-wide VRFs or like MPLS VPNs. And the common use cases we see at a macro level include separating lines of business. That's always a big one. Secure partner connectivity, and then our various M&A exercises that we see happen frequently. So now we think at a network level, macro segmentation generally isn't enough. You need to go a little deeper, which is why we have some micro segmentation as well. So micro segmentation in Alkira is centered around groups. So say that we have our corporate segment up top there in the blue. That is representative of our, let's say, our internal applications and user traffic. We'll say that we have specific ways we handle things within that segment, like non-production traffic versus production traffic, or even how we route on-premises traffic. So we can create groups for each one of these distinct areas. And, once we create them, that non-production group, production group, etc., it's automatically available globally in the platform. So these are global in scope. They're not per availability zone. They're not per region. Once you create them in the platform, anything that you connect to Alkira can be added into these buckets and you can create policy against. So from there, these policies are usually meant to enforce our business intent. Common use cases here are typically app environment separation and also grouping things and then steering steering that group towards services like Palo Alto or maybe, maybe Infoblox. And really just really advanced traffic engineering and, natting policies, things like that. So if you want to learn more, if this looked interesting and you want to see it in action, make sure and tune in on June 8th for the Tech in 20 with David Klebanoff. David is going to dive in and bring these scenarios to life in a live demo. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, William. So I have a couple questions of my own, but while I'm asking those questions, William, maybe if there's anyone on the webinar who has questions they'd like answered, please feel free to jump into the Q&A section and ask those questions, and Joanne can moderate those questions out. But while we wait for questions to come in, I have a couple of my own. So William, starting with the CXP, I mean, so we talked a lot about how the CXP was a cloud native platform, but inherently there's a lot of we'll call it muted down dynamic routing protocols, right? So it's very basic BGP. You don't have the advanced options of BGP that exist in a premise-based network. How does the Alkira CXP really handle that traffic flow? I mean, do customers still have that simplified dynamic routing, or is the CXP more intelligent in terms of how it routes and how it steers traffic?
Yeah, so a lot of that. So if you think of in terms, we really go heavy into making the integration of various on-premises networks as seamless as possible. And to do that, you have to have a lot of things available that were available to network engineers where they are today. So we make this policy much more seamless, much easier, but we also provide ways to do things that you're used to doing back on premises. So say that I want to create some advanced routing policies and I want to prioritize certain links over others, or I want to steer traffic, and I want those controls that I had back in the data center. So with these policies that you can create in our platform, we do things, communities, extended communities, prefix lists, prepending, like a lot of these things that you would leverage when you're in the data center. We can do those within our policy framework. You don't have to. You don't have to use those, but they're there for you. And we actually see those get leveraged, a lot, because it's just easy. If you're doing something a specific way, it's just easier to continue doing it that specific way until such a time that you can really transition.
That's awesome. So let's go with a hypothetical here. Say I'm a customer and I have 6 regions across 2 clouds, and each region has an HA pair of NGFWs protecting that region. In this architecture, how do those NGFWs stay where they are, or does that change?
So instead of when you do this, so say you're in a non-Alkira world, there's a few different architectures across the major cloud provider architectures, like design patterns across these major cloud providers that you follow to set up an NGFW. So usually there's some type of load balancer in place. If you're in AWS, you're using global load balancing. A lot of times you have this load balancer sandwich scenario, and there's just a lot of semantics. You have to sort of engineer that traffic steering. You don't want asymmetric routing everywhere, and then you have to think about I have all these subnets that I've created, maybe sometimes thousands, in a VNet or a VPC. So how do I ensure that each one of those subnets is actually routing through that NGFW? And so you have to go in and you have to worry about routing tables and things like that. So, and kind of thinking of how we would handle that solution. So first off, through our platform, we would actually bootstrap and handle all the networking to the firewall itself. So you're not worrying about the routing being asymmetric, and you're not worrying about a lot of the complicated configuration for auto scaling. Like we have one method of auto scaling, across all the clouds. So you can land this NGFW per region through our platform, and all you have to do is point whatever workloads that you want to go through that NGFW, just create a simple policy and point it to the firewall. And we handle up to the point of the bootstrapping and the life cycle of the firewall, but everything on the firewall, like the policies, the configurations that you've probably already built, like in a panorama, we don't touch any of that. We leave that to the customer, because generally I'd say 9 times out of 10, those are already created and they already know what they want to do. They already have those. And a lot of times that challenging part is the routing and all the semantics outside the firewall, getting the traffic to the firewall.
Okay, awesome. And do I need a Alkira appliance in my data center to connect to the CXP?
No, you do not. We don't have any agents, any appliances that we deploy. If you think about it, a lot of the products out there today, we live in an API-based economy. So if you think of the cloud providers, for instance, they have like a robust suite of APIs. So everything we build is, heading towards that direction, is through this API ecosystem. And instead of saying, hey, we want to deploy like an appliance in every single network you want to connect, what does that sound like? It sounds like, 15 years ago when I started and all of my branch sites had, 3 different connectivity providers, and, we had an active and a standby and redistribution from EIGRP to BGP and then back to the data center. And, so instead of taking that approach, a lot of customers already have an SD-WAN fabric in place. So why not integrate that SD-WAN fabric into the CXP? We can do IPsec. Why not just pull in the IPsec connector to the VPC, or to the CXP rather? So all the different ways that customers already connect, we have pretty seamless, pretty easy to deploy, whether you want to do it through the UI or through automation. Me